William R. Noje, grew up in the city of Rochester, New York. His dad worked at Eastman Kodak, and his mother was a schoolteacher. In 1974, when he was 17 years old, Bill attended the first Conservative Political Action Conference, now known as CPAC, in Washington. Mr. Noje got Ronald Reagan's autograph before watching him deliver his City Upon a Hill speech. It was an inspiration, and it laid the foundation for Mr. Noje's political beliefs and future work supporting democracy movements around the world. In a 1976 article, one of his first major newspaper profiles, Donald J. Trump claimed to be worth $200 million. How could he claim to be worth more than $200 million when, as he divulged years later to casino regulators, his 1976 taxable income was $24,594? Mr. Trump appropriated his father's entire empire as his own. By claiming his father's wealth as his own, Donald Trump transformed his place in the world. A brash 30-year-old playboy worth more than $200 million proved irresistible to New York City's bankers, politicians, and journalists. Fred Trump and his companies also began extending large loans and lines of credit to Mr. Trump. In 1979, according to records filed with New Jersey casino regulators, he borrowed $1.5 million in January, $65,000 in February, $122,000 in March, $150,000 in April, $192,000 in May, $226,000 in June, $2.4 million in July, and $40,000 in August. Many of the loans were more like gifts. Some were interest-free and had no repayment schedule. In the late 1970s, when Donald Trump was converting the old Commodore Hotel into a Grand Hyatt, his father stepped up the loans. Fred Trump extended more loans with Trump Tower in the early 1980s. While in his early 20s, Bill Noje went to college, took up parachuting, and traveled in the Middle East and Asia. He spent time in an Israeli kibbutz, toured Iran before the 1979 revolution, and traveled across the former Soviet Union on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. To pay for college and his first car, a Dodge Dart with the Chrysler Slant 6 engine he bought from his dad, Mr. Noje took on many different jobs. Mr. Noje worked as a night janitor at Eastman Kodak, in the research department at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, and in the Washington offices of U.S. Senator James Buckley of New York and U.S. Senator Gary Hart of Colorado. Bill also had a job as Smokey the Bear in a National Park Service bodysuit, lumbering around shopping malls with a sign about not starting forest fires. In the early 1980s, Bill went to Cambodia without the benefit of a visa, but with courtesy of Task Force 80. He worked to assist a group of democracy activists called the Khmer People's National Liberation Front. Upon his return, Mr. Noje worked in Washington to support the KPNLF's pro-democracy efforts in the halls of Congress and with other interested parties. Mr. Noje said the Cambodian democracy movement was ultimately successful. Cambodia is now a fledgling constitutional democracy and rebuilding after decades of war.